Ethan sat in his cramped dorm room, headphones blaring his favorite playlist as he pored over his textbooks. The clock on the wall ticked endlessly, marking the passing hours of a day that felt like 100. Exhaustion was beginning to crawl its way into his bones. His eyes blurred, the words on the pages no longer making sense, the muffled music in his ears becoming a distant hum. He leaned back, closing his eyes for just a moment. It wasn't just darkness, it was a scene unfolding in his mind. A vision, vivid and unmistakable. The Senate, ancient Rome. The air was thick with tension, suffocating with a sense of urgency. The marble columns loomed tall around him, the chatter of the senators buzzing in the background. He could hear the faint rustling of tunics, the scrape of sandals against stone. His focus was on a figure at the center, Julius Caesar. His form was regal, towering over the others as he moved through the Senate, his eyes cold, calculating. Ethan could feel it, Caesar's arrogance, his belief that he was untouchable. The Senate had become a mockery to him, a theater of puppets. But as Ethan watched, the chilling whispers in the air started. The plot was in motion. He could hear the conspirators now, their hushed voices among themselves, their eyes darting nervously towards Caesar. They're going to kill him, Ethan realized, his breath catching in his throat. It was like he had been placed right there in the moment of history, like a ghost trapped in the shadows, witnessing the fatal events unfold. He opened his eyes, blinking rapidly. He could taste the fear in the air, the heaviness of betrayal. But his room was still. His heart thudded with the aftershock of what he had just experienced. It wasn't a dream. It felt far too real, too vivid, like he had lived it. Ethan tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just his brain overworked from the stress of college. Soon as he closed his eyes again, it happened. The Senate, once again. This time it was different. He was standing there, not just a bystander, but right there. He was part of the crowd, hidden in plain sight among the conspirators. He saw Brutus, Cassius, Decimus. They stood together with one singular purpose, to end Caesar's reign. Ethan watched Brutus, his dagger clenched in his hand, his eyes wide with a mixture of resolve and terror. The moment was coming. Nothing Ethan could do to stop it. His body was frozen. Caesar entered the chamber, his robe flowing behind him, his face impassive. He didn't notice the conspirators gathering in the shadows, the cold steel glinting in their hands, the inevitable doom creeping closer. Caesar reached the Senate pulpit. The conspirators exchanged nervous glances, their knives in hand. Then it happened. The first strike. Casca. The knife plunged into Caesar's neck with a sickening sound. Ethan's vision blurred with the blood spraying across the room. Caesar gasped, his eyes wide in shock and pain, his hand instinctively clutching the wound. The senators crowded around him. The knives came one after another, tearing into his flesh like a vicious storm. His cries muffled by the chaos. Ethan's heart pounded harder, as if he too could feel the agony. He tried to look away. All Ethan could do was watch as Caesar's life was violently ripped away. The Emperor of Rome, once invincible, was now just another corpse, bleeding out in front of him. And then, at the last moment, as Caesar crumpled to the floor, his blood pooling around him. His dying gaze locked with that of Brutus. The betrayal was evident, the final moment of humanity slipping from Caesar's face. "Et tu, Brute," Caesar whispered, his voice thick with betrayal. Brutus faltered for a moment, his dagger hovering above Caesar, but then he drove it in one final time, deep into Caesar's heart. They all warped into a twisted, violent smear. Ethan tried to scream, to break free, but the darkness was pulling him back, suffocating him, drowning him in the moment of Caesar's death. Ethan awoke with a start, gasping for air. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. He was back in his dorm room, the music still playing softly in his ears. The clock on the wall had barely moved. It was as if no time had passed at all. But something felt wrong. He could still taste the blood in his mouth. He could still feel the cold steel of the dagger in his hand. Wait, in his hand? Ethan looked down at his palms, trembling, and there in his right hand was a small curved blade, its edge slick with something dark. His breath caught in his throat. He had no idea how it had gotten there. It wasn't his. The blade felt cold, foreign, and as his mind raced, the realization hit him like a freight train. He wasn't just a witness. Ethan stumbled backward, his eyes going wide with terror. The whispers returned, louder this time, echoing in his skull. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were commands, demands. "Do it, Brutus," the voice hissed. The gaze shifted back to the blade.